It's time for Ask Mike Mondays. Mike answers one listener's question every week. Here's Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to Ask Mike Mondays. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me today, the mayor of Beckerville, USA, Mr. Michael Becker.
Hey, Paul. How's it going?
It's going great. Now, again, why do we call you the mayor of Beckerville?
Well, it started because we owned 1,100 units in a close area from my hometown, and then we called it Becker Hills, and then somehow it morphed into Beckerville, and I became the mayor of it.
So it just because you can pay so much in freaking property taxes, the governor of the state should put a limousine to your driveway every day to drive you to the office. I mean, these property taxes have gone up so much, at least in the state of Texas and some of these counties, that there should be 2 bottles of champagne in the back seat, one for you coming, one for you going every day, just to keep you in the lifestyle you've grown accustomed to, and at least in their side of all the money you guys pay in property taxes. So we're joined today again with Mr. Michael Becker, who, as you know, was a banker. He was a commercial banker for one of the largest banks in the country. He transitioned over from loaning money to owning real estate. And his group over at SPI, they own 6,000 plus units in Texas, all the way from Dallas down to Austin, all the way out to Tyler, Texas, which is probably about 2 hours east of Texas. And so they're kind of Texas specific in terms of where they own. But some of these lessons that we're talking about are the same whether you own a property in Tennessee or you own a property in Utah. It's all pretty much the same math in these different parts of the world. So we're always glad that Michael is on answering these questions. So if you think that we bring value to the podcast, go on to iTunes whenever you have a second and give us a 5-star rating and kind of let us know how you thought we did. If we educated you a little bit about multifamily, it's pretty much what our job is, to make sure that you know what's going on. And Michael, since he operates so many units, he kind of has his finger on the pulse about what's going on. And so we try to give it to you on a weekly basis about, anything that we're seeing in the marketplace, anything that you should be aware of. And through Ask Mike Mondays, we ask Mike a question from a listener and go on to Old Capital Podcast and write down a question that you want to have Michael answer. Be more than happy on the next podcast to answer your question. So again, Michael, we appreciate you being in on the call today. So listener asked, Michael, I am starting to see activity. If I find a deal and put in an LOI, which is a letter of intent, what additional language should I add for these crazy times? I think really what they're trying to figure out is there any outs if coronavirus gets any worse and people don't have income in the middle of a transaction? Is there any language that we should put into these LOIs or even the property sale agreements?
At this point in time, I'd say you try to do something like that, you're probably not going to get a deal. I think we're kind of back to where we were in February, Paul. We're pretty damn close to it. Maybe it's not quite as much hard money, and maybe the pool is a little smaller. Yeah, to be honest with you, I mean, for what I'm seeing, the volume's picked up substantially in the last, say, 2 weeks. We're looking at a ton of deals trying to get something to make some sense. The debt's getting a little bit better, or a lot better. Escrows are coming down. They're not fully off with additional P&I or PITI escrows. There used to be 12 months of PITI. It's pretty standard here, right? I think there's initial reaction from the agencies, and now into P&I payments only, and now from 12 months is down to 9 months on a couple of deals we got quoted here. So I think it's starting to kind of get back to normal, and that's 3% IO right now. Whether it's floating or fixed, is basically 3% IO for deals of size. I'm sure the small balance stuff, you could probably talk to that a little better than I, Paul. It's probably a little bit higher than that, but that's kind of the generally speaking, that's where it's at. And that 3% IO money, a lot of these deals are working, and a lot of people realize that collections held up a heck of a lot better than everyone feared, and everyone, wants to buy distress. You could go wade into retail or hospitality, but there's very little distress in the multifamily space, generally speaking, at least in the Sunbelt markets. It might be a different case in New York City, which I think I talked to one of our mutual buddies, Paul, and he's buying a deal in Harlem, is going to buy a second deal in Harlem, and it's probably 40-50% off the peak pricing from 2-3 years ago, but they've been kind of hit with a double whammy or triple whammy of rent control laws, a bunch of overbuilding, the pandemic hitting them hard, and then now they're having a bunch of riots in Manhattan. So I think that's kind of a situation where I was talking with him, and he was telling me, like, look, it's 40-50% off the peak, and everywhere else is basically has not moved. So that was kind of a reason for him to start taking actions up there, which made some sense to me. Actually, I was kind of thought he was crazy at first, but I think in the markets we play in, I'm not really seeing much price variance at all, Paul. I think we're going to kind of get back at it. So I don't know if that maybe will ultimately be proved to be a dumb decision if we all go buy some stuff and 7, 8, 10 months from now we hit a crazy recession and have more people laid off, or we feel the impacts. I don't know if we have more people laid off than we did, but we start feeling some impacts and collections maybe down the road that we haven't seen yet, maybe. But from what I see that's visible today, it seems like we're kind of getting back at it, Paul.
So today, would you put hard money down on a deal?
If it took it to win it and I felt comfortable with the debt, then I would, yeah.
No, that's good.
But, I mean, we have a lot of confidence in our ability, to get capital and to get debt. And, obviously we've always been pretty cautious when we put hard money up. I want to make sure that we're sensitizing in particular, the loan, and, make sure we're looking at all loan, taxes, insurance, physical part of it, making sure I know what I'm walking into. And then, if all that kind of checks the box and I feel confident in it, we'll post some hard money. But, we've always felt, but the last, many, many years, that's what we always have taken that level of care to before we start putting our money up. But I think if that's going to be the difference between me winning something and not winning something, I would do it myself. Not saying that that's right for everybody else, but I'm confident in my abilities. So, I would do it.
Gotcha. The listener went on to ask, Mike, what is the craziest purchase you and your group bought or sold? I want to hear the story.
One that kind of just pops to mind, probably either the best or second best deal we did. We bought a 260 unit property in suburban Dallas back in early 2014. I believe we paid $8.6 million. We ended up having a long-term loan on it. So we ended up about 40 months or so into it, 3.5, 4 years into it. We sold it for on a loan assumption on $18.2 million. Wow. So I think we more than tripled our money, right? I think it was like a quadruple of the money. And then 2 years later, the guy we sold it to just sold it beginning part of this year. I think it was $26.2 million about 2.5 years after he bought it from me. So I could have, if I would have held on a little bit longer, it would have went from 8.6 to 26, but went from 8.6 to 18.2, so it was our 18.86 or whatever it was. I can't remember exactly, and it's crazy. And I promise you, I did a whole lot more work than the guy who bought it from me before he sold it. So I did all the heavy lifting, but I'm happy for him. I mean, I was glad that he was able to make some money on it, and it was good for him. It was good for us at the time too, because it was a nice trade up, and then we bought a really nice, good looking asset in North Fort Worth with the money that we took out. We sold with it. We sold the property, about a nice asset in North Fort Worth.
Talking about crazy stories, how about telling us the story about getting into senior housing and then having the coronavirus kick off?
Yeah, we bought our first independent living deal, so kind of 65 and up with meals and there's no medical component to it, so no nursing, no healthcare or anything like that. But we closed on that deal in February of this year, and then coronavirus hit. So we're going to be fine on that. We had a war chest of working capital, and we had over years with a debt service, and their income's pretty much covering our loan right now, even though we're pretty low occupancy because we bought a distressed deal. But we're actually just finished up the carpeting and paint on that, Paul. I was talking with our partner today about that, so I need to go out and take a look at it. So we're kind of doing the exterior renovations through this, but it's been interesting having basically turning that place into a quasi prison. I feel kind of bad. Got to really restrict the movement in and out because the average age of someone in there is over 80. So the demographic that's clearly in the crosshairs of COVID. But I'm pretty confident. Luckily, we forecasted no cash flow for the first 2 years. This was a pretty distressed deal that we bought. So luckily, it looks like I'll probably be right about that.
Yeah, you probably will be right about that. That was a distressed asset. It's a nice looking property, but it was kind of a one-off deal for a group on the East Coast or wherever the heck they were from. And this was kind of their only asset remaining. They were not sticking a lot of money into it. And, it wasn't that old of a property, but it did need to be updated. And then as soon as you guys bought it, the coronavirus comes in and you can't go in and out to do any interior repairs. So the only thing you were forced to do is the exterior repairs. And one of the things that you were going to do is replace some of the windows that had been fogged up. And so you can't go into these folks' units just because you don't want to be the guy that they see in the newspaper that got all these people sick. So it's really been on a shutdown ever since you guys bought it. But I think you're right. What I recall is that the leverage was low in that deal. You put a lot of money into reserves up front, and it'll eventually be a winner down the road. What do you think about investing in these independent housing deals? Is that something like an average investor should get into? Does it take, what are some of the hot buttons that people who are listening to this that are thinking about, investing in something like that? What are some of the things that investors should know?
Yeah, well, we joint ventured with one of my buddies who had multiple other independent living deals. So we had he's the operating partner, and I'm kind of the investor relations guy. Basically, is our relationship. So he's kind of doing the day to day with a professional third party management in place. So he had the experience. But I mean, from my view, they operate similar from a market rate multifamily deal, and in certain respects, and it's different in others. For example, this was, I think it was 178 units. And if we had 178 market rate multifamily property, we'd have 4 employees. We have 2 in the inside, 2 on the outside. Well, this one has about 30 employees because we have, the director and the salespeople and entertainment people and cleaning people and, like full kitchen and someone that drives a town car or a bus that takes people around. So it's a completely different level of service that you have at an independent living, even though we don't have the medical part. And then the rents are, typically 4 to 5 times greater because it's like an all-inclusive deal where they get, 3 meals a day and the utilities all included. So it's a different business model from that standpoint. There's a lot more cost associated with it. And it's a little bit, these apartments are little businesses on their own, but this one is definitely that on steroids with the food service, and got a lot more regulation with it as well. So making sure you had someone in there that knows what they're doing, that can kind of make sure you stay compliant with it. And we have a pretty large management company that's all they do. They specialize in this, certainly is, I think, a key to make this deal work. So yeah, it's just similar in some respects and definitely different in others.
Yeah, the key on that thing is having an operating partner that knows what the hell they're doing. It would not be something that if you went from single family then to multifamily and then try to do it without having somebody to hold your hand through it, that wouldn't work out very well. You need somebody that's been in the business that understands how this stuff works, because it is a different mindset with a different tenant base. And these tenants tend to stay at these properties a lot longer. Would you say
4
that's
5
true?
years versus, say, 18 months.
Yeah. So it's kind of a different mindset. So, if you're thinking about getting into multifamily, especially with independent living, just to do more homework on that before you obligate yourself to get into that business. Probably the last question is, while overall rent payments results are encouraging, there's meaningful deterioration in the ability to meet rent obligations among those living in the lower priced Class C apartment property units. Have you heard of tenants paying rents weekly through ACH deduction in the future for budgeting purposes?
I think we definitely have a lot of people on payment plans. So where they're paying, smaller chunks throughout the month. So, and then, our payment plans typically have them paying on Fridays throughout the month. So every Friday is like a big collection day, basically, for us right now. That could potentially be part of it. I mean, I don't think that's obviously optimal going forward. I can't remember the name of it, Paul, but we've rolled out on our properties a service where we get paid up front, and they basically have like a credit where they pay this third party, basically loans them like a short-term loan, and then they pay that person with some service charges on top of it weekly. So we get our payment up front, and then they pay that service weekly. I can't, for the life of me, next time we record one, I'll go back and find out what that was called. But it's a newer service that I hadn't heard of until we implemented it. So I think there's some businesses being created out of this that maybe some of that sticks, maybe some of that doesn't. So I think that's okay from a owner's perspective because we're getting our rent paid, on time by the third party, and they're taking the risk. I think if you start taking risks like that, you're going to get yourself in trouble if we kind of get back to normal time. So, I'm kind of going back to boring, simple times again, which would be you pay me your rent's due on the 1st, is late on the 4th. that would be good when we get back to that type of environment again.
That's great. Michael, thanks for hanging out with us and answering some questions on Ask Mike Mondays. If people wanted to maybe co-invest with SPI, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you? And really, what does co-investing mean?
Yeah, so you guys want to find out more information about what we do, the best way is just simply go to our company's website, which is www.spiadvisor.com. It's SPI like spy advisor.com. There's a contact us form, fill that out. We're always happy to send out some information and get you guys on the list. And what we typically do, Paul, what our main focus is trying to go identify some high quality apartment deals, and we go put them out and raise capital kind of syndication style. So we put a good chunk of the money in, and then we get the bulk of it from other people and kind of pool the money together and like an apartment syndication. And so if you guys are interested about learning about more you kind of future opportunities that hopefully will be not too far in the future, because we're trying pretty hard to make some stuff happen right now. Just go to our website, fill the form out, and get you into our database.
Tell me a little bit about that, our advisory work, because I think that's something that a lot of people that have, maybe have sold something in San Francisco and looking to place it someplace else. I'm thinking about all the people up in Seattle looking to sell and trying to get their money out of Seattle because of all the craziness going on up there. What's the advisory business doing? Can you tell me at least one success on that?
Yeah, we kind of carved out a little niche where we'll do, from time to time, work with a few typical stories. I have a 1031 and I'm from out of the area. I want to come into Texas, don't know anybody, and just want someone to kind of help me place that money. So we'll typically either form a joint venture, a 10 common or a TIC, and do a deal with someone like that. So we've done a handful of those. The one that kind of the poster board story is we had a gentleman who had a fourplex in oceanfront Marina Del Rey, California. He turned that into a 100-unit deal in Dallas that we owned for a couple of years, and then we 80s deal, and we more than doubled up on that in a couple of years. And we turned that into a 200-unit brand new Class A deal that we then refinanced out a year after that and pulled a little bit of money out and lowered our pay rate quite a bit. So it's been a pretty powerful. It tells you how strong the cycle was. This last cycle that we go from 4 units to 100 units to 200 units, and then even refinance that out a year after we owned it. It's been one hell of a good run.
And so he went from not receiving any income or getting something not very much out of the property, the fourplex in Marina Del Rey, to making $35,000-$40,000. Yeah. It is just absolutely wild when you take money that's kind of dead money out in some of these high cost areas and then put into areas where cash flow really makes a difference and matters to people. And so I think that was a great story, and I've heard that before, but I can't have you tell that enough because I really enjoy that story. So, Michael Becker at SPI, we certainly do appreciate you answering all of our questions for this week. Looking forward to next week. Again, that's Michael Becker. I'm Paul Peebles. Have a great day.